When I was 22 years old, I wrote, shot, directed, and edited a feature film, 80-minute long movie that is now available on streaming. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I did it. So I've always been a filmmaker. I made my first feature film when I was 14 years old. I made a video about that here on this channel. In that one, I shot it entirely in my parents' garage on green screen. We didn't know what we were doing at all. It took me 2 years to edit that movie on our family desktop. After that, I tried to make a sequel to that movie and it failed. We probably shot about a third of the movie before the main actor dropped out of the project. I was in just way over my head. One of the cameras wasn't even shooting at the proper frame rate. It was a mess. After that, I stuck with TV shows. I made a 5-episode fan series of Doctor Who with my best friend. We then went on to make a 5-episode sitcom about a group of friends trying to make it as a band in LA. We shot that in my parents' garage, and we built this set that we could flip to be either an apartment or a bar, and so every scene had to take place either in that apartment or in that bar. My parents watched that show and they said, "You really can't put this out there. It's like kind of high school and inappropriate," and there were a number of things that were wrong with it, but it was a huge learning experience and so much fun to make. After that, I stuck with shorter films. I made comedy sketches and dramatic short films. All through college, all I shot were short films. That's like what you do in film school. I really enjoyed making them, but they didn't feel like real movies because they weren't long enough. After I graduated college, I moved back home to be a property manager for a house that my family owns. We were gonna rent out the bedrooms. I got to live there for free, and my job was to make sure that there were tenants in all of the rooms, they all paid on time. If anything broke in the house, I was there to fix it. It was a pretty good gig. So I had this house at the time, and I was starting my freelance production company. And I remember thinking, this is a great time to make my first movie. Like my first real movie. I'm starting to buy nice equipment anyway, I should just use this gear. So I shot a couple of test films, little vignettes, and everything looked great. I was like, I think I can actually do this. I think I can make a movie. I remember hearing a story about how Scorsese made his first movie, and he didn't really have any money, but he looked around and said, what do I have access to? What is it that I know about? What can I make a convincing story about? And so I looked around and I said, well, I have a house, I have a camera, and I just graduated from college and I'm dealing with all these emotions that come from going through that. So maybe I can just make a movie about that experience. I started thinking about what kind of movie I'd make. I would make the characters in the movie my age, because I know how people my age talk. Then I'd come up with a setting to put all of them in together. I really love The Big Chill and St. Elmo's Fire. Like, both of those movies really inspired me. So I kind of took the element of The Big Chill, where they all come together, and then the element of St. Elmo's Fire, where they've just graduated college and they're trying to figure out what to do with their lives, and married those two things together, placing it in a modern context. So it's about a group of friends, they're super close in college, and they made a promise to get together for Thanksgiving. And now it's been 6 months since they graduated, and they're all gonna get together, and all of the drama and elements that were unspoken are gonna bubble to the surface and cause a massive tension and conflict. This mirrored my own life. I had a really tight group of friends from college, and now that I had graduated, things were really falling apart with that group of people. And I think even at some point we maybe had made a pact that we were gonna get together for Thanksgiving. I don't remember if I made that part up or not. So once I had this premise, I started writing a screenplay. I had 5 characters, I always start with the characters, and I thought about, what do they want? What are their personalities? What are they looking for? And then I started putting the personalities together and just began writing. I think the first draft only took me a couple of weeks to put together. The story almost felt like it was writing itself. I would write for 1 to 2 hours a day and just bang out scenes. So then I was done, I finished that first draft, and I read it over for the first time and realized I am a terrible screenwriter. That was my initial reaction. I read the script and I was like, this frickin' sucks. This is terrible. This story doesn't fit at all. I don't like how this story ends. This isn't gonna work. Like, it was just, I was so upset. But then I remembered hearing something from a talk that Neil Gaiman gave. And one of the things he said is that he doesn't believe in writer's block. He said that writer's block is just a point when a writer was writing and they made a left when they should have made a right. There was a fork in the road and they took the wrong turn. And now they've written themselves into a corner because they've gone down the wrong path. And that's why the story just doesn't work. That's what writer's block is. So even though I had finished the story, I was really unhappy with it. And I remembered what Neil Gaiman had said. And so I started looking back through my script. And I realized, well, the first 30 pages aren't bad. The first 40, 50, 60 pages I actually rather like. Oh my gosh, the first 70 pages are pretty good. And then at around page 70, the story makes a turn that doesn't feel right at all. I had essentially tried to tack a Hollywood ending onto this very indie movie. Like, this was a story about love, yes, but for me to put an ending where the characters actually get together didn't make sense in the context of the story I was making. So I went back to that point, around page 70, where I felt like things kind of went off the rails, and I rewrote the ending, taking into full account what would the characters actually do in this situation. Not what do I want, but follow the grain of the story. And after that, I finished the screenplay. And yes, there were edits that were made after that, but that essentially was the screenplay that I ended up shooting. Finding actors can be tricky. I didn't have any money to pay anyone. And so I put up a call on Facebook and I said, hey, I'm making this feature film. I'm looking for people around my age in their early 20s. If anyone's interested, let me know. And I made a list of the characters and who I was looking for, essentially. I got back dozens of replies. I was shocked by the number of people that were willing to make this feature film without getting paid for it. I felt bad. I really wanted to pay people. I just simply didn't have the money. I basically had enough money to buy snacks for everyone when they were on set, and that was essentially it. Now, I had written the story in such a way to make it a little bit easier to shoot, so there were only 5 characters in the whole movie, essentially. Now, one of these characters I had written with somebody in mind. There's a woman named Kellyanne Ross who played the lead in my senior thesis film. I loved working with her. We had a great energy on set. And so this main character of Madison in the story, I really thought of her when I was writing that character. Now, I'm sure someone else could have played it, but when I was writing the story, I was thinking of her performance. She has this ability to kind of be very sweet and very sarcastic at the same time, and that was what I was looking for in Madison. And so I set up a meeting with her and I gave her the script and I said, hey, you read this, let me know if you're interested at all. If you are, it's yours. She called me back like a day later and said, hey, Mishak, I would love to make this movie, let's do it. So she became that main actress in the film. So really I just needed 4 other people, 1 girl and 3 guys. From here, it was just a ton of emails and Zoom calls with people that were interested in being in the movie. Each one of the 3 guy characters, I knew immediately once I got into their auditions. There were a lot of people I met with and I would walk away from those auditions and kind of feel, that just isn't quite right. But the 3 guys that I ended up bringing on the project, each one of them, within 2 minutes of being on that call, I realized, holy cow, you were born to play this role. Yes, please play this for me. The girl was a lot harder to cast. I got way more submissions for the female role, and going through those, I would find people that almost had it. That it was quite convincing, but maybe it was because I had so many auditions that I was kind of in this choice paralysis of like, who do I go with to play this role? Now, for the audition, each one of them, playing the Beth character, read the monologue that she gives in the pit scene in the movie. And there were many that I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of incredible, but they weren't quite there. So basically the submissions had closed and I received one last email from someone. And I essentially thought I knew who I was gonna go with. I wasn't super thrilled with my decision, but I was pretty confident in it. And I got this one last email and I said, you know what, screw it. I'll hop on one more Zoom call. So we got on the call and she did the read of that pit monologue. And she didn't read it like anyone else that I had seen. It was so much more real, so much more raw, and so much more from the heart that I was just shocked. I mean, it was like the auditions I had had with the guys, where when I heard her play that character, she became that character so completely and fully. And so I knew Caitlin was the person I had to cast in that role.
You graduate college and suddenly you're expected to know who you are and what you want to do, when really you're still thinking about if you chose the right college or not. I don't know. I feel like sometimes I forget where I am in life.
So from the time I finalized casting the film to the time we actually started shooting was only like 2 weeks. At this point, I was just planning to do everything myself. I was gonna light it, I was gonna run sound, I was just gonna shoot the movie on my own. But before we started, I texted a couple filmmaker friends who I knew and said, hey guys, if you're interested, I'm shooting this movie, if anyone wants to help. And I ended up texting a guy I had met at like a filmmaker's event a couple of months prior. We had sat down, got to chatting, we were about the same age. And I think I even told him like, hey, I'm making this movie. If you have any interest, like, let me know. But we hadn't talked since. And I said, hey, Tyler, if you're interested, I'm making this movie. If you want to come out, these are the dates. And shockingly, he replied, dude, I would love to. Can I bring my buddy and my girlfriend? They would also love to help. And I said, yes, absolutely. Tyler came in and was so fantastic. He had a great eye. Will, his buddy, came and ran sound and lighting on almost the entire movie as well. They were both so committed to this project, even though the first time that they heard the script was at the table read. It was so fantastic and so uplifting to feel like somebody really cared about what you were making as much as you cared about making it. I remember about halfway through production, Tyler was looking at the camera that we were shooting on, and he was saying, you know, I've been really looking to upgrade my gear. What kind of camera do you have? And I told him, and so he comes back to set the next day and says, hey, Mishek, I bought that camera last night. And I go, what, actually? And he goes, yeah, dude, like, I just want to be able to shoot like you shoot. And I said, why don't you just bring it to set? Like, we could just run 2 cameras. You have the exact same camera I do. It's going to get the exact same kind of image. Why don't we just run 2 cameras on some of the scenes, and that way we can shoot twice as fast? And so Tyler ended up bringing his camera, and we had my camera. And so there are many scenes in the movie that we were able to shoot with 2 cameras because of his dedication to this film. And that's just, it was so inspiring and so just overwhelmingly positive for someone to come onto a project and say like, yeah, I want to help you make this movie and actually like make it a reality. I'm so thankful for that. So we had a table read about a week before we shot the first scene. And this was the first time that everyone had met. We were a couple days out from filming, and even one of the actors, the guy who played Derek, because he lived like 3 hours away, couldn't even come down for the table read. So it was just the 4 other actors there meeting for the first time along with the crew. But immediately, I could tell there was chemistry with this group. The first night we started filming, it was basically all new equipment for me. I had bought a gimbal that I was shooting on for the first time. It was the first time I'd used this camera to shoot anything this big, so like making sure all the settings were right was very nerve-wracking. It was so scary to like shoot that first scene because once we shot it, it was like, okay, now the movie is started, right? Like up to that point, it was just planning, but once you roll camera on that first scene, it's like, these are the images that we're going to use in the final film. And that first scene that we shot is in fact in the actual movie. But the actors and the crew that I had just made it so easy. They all were on board. We all like knew what we were creating, and everyone was super enthusiastic and passionate about it. So we shot for a total of 12 days. And many of the days were after work. So we would shoot from like 5 to 10 p.m. But the days we shot weren't all together. Like it was over the course of the month of March. We're trying to make it look like November as much as possible. March is about as late as you can shoot. It was over the course of the month of March, but they weren't consecutive days. Like maybe we would shoot a Friday, Saturday, Sunday here and there, but oftentimes they were sort of spattered throughout the week. Or even if they were, it was like we were shooting from 5 to 10, but not till 5 to 10 the next day. So between all the shoots, I would back everything up, and then I started just editing the footage, just kind of doing quick assembly edits of the whole movie. The wonderful thing about this was that by the time we got to finishing the scenes, I could just slot them into the timeline where they were needed. Like I had already done so much of the editing up to this point that basically once I had the movie shot, the movie was done. At least from like a basic cutting perspective. It also kept things super organized because I knew exactly what we had and I knew what we needed to shoot because there were literally just gaps in the timeline. Like I could watch through the movie and say, we're gonna shoot that scene tomorrow. I could watch the next scene and then I could say, okay, we're gonna shoot that scene tomorrow. Now, the other nice thing was that we shot almost everything at the house that I was in. There were a couple scenes that we shot down the street or at a store or just kind of around in the neighborhood, but almost everything was shot at the house. The scene that we shot at the grocery store outside, we had to move pretty fast because we didn't have permission to be there. And there was a security guard who was kind of like pacing. We weren't doing anything wrong. We weren't doing anything illegal, but we really didn't want someone to come over and just ruin our shot. So that scene was just like super fast. We got our shots. We got out of there as fast as possible. We were shooting a scene in a store down the street and the owner gave us permission to shoot there. But then it comes to the shoot day and I get a text from her and she sort of has cold feet. She's like, I don't know. I think she was maybe sick, so she wasn't going to be in there that day. And she was a little bit nervous about us shooting in there. And I said, look, we're going to be totally fine. No worries. We're going to shoot the scene. And I took the crew in to the store and the store was like active. Like there were people, perusing items in the store. And I told the people behind the counter, like, hey, this is what we're doing. They knew that we were supposed to be there, but we didn't really have like full permission to be there. So asking them to turn off the music or change any of the space, like that wasn't going to happen. So we just went in and we shot our scenes with everything happening around us in the store, just to like make sure that we got what we needed to get. We had 2 cameras in there. I think we ran through the whole thing 2 or 3 times, and that was what we shot. And then afterwards, I just had the actors come in and they had to dub over all of those lines because there was music playing in the background. So that scene had to be dubbed completely. We were able to shoot very fast too because I was the editor, so I knew what we needed and what we didn't need. if we're shooting a wide shot, maybe we only needed the very beginning of that wide shot, or maybe we just needed a wide shot at the end where they leave the room. Like, we don't need to shoot the whole scene from every single angle. I did like to play things out in close-ups, and I like to get long performances from people. I feel like that's a great way to get what you want from your actor. But if something fell apart on some particular shot, I could say, hey, I know I'm not going to use that anyway. It's okay, let's move on to the next thing. I didn't want to get bogged down by those little details. I wanted to make sure that we stayed on schedule and we actually shot a freaking movie. Like, that was more important to me than, making sure every single take was absolutely perfect. Like, do we have the material? Can I cut this together? Great. Okay, move on. Once we wrapped up shooting, like I said, I basically had the whole movie all the way together. And from that point, it was just dialing in fine details. Getting the sound right, that was huge. Trying to figure out how to match audio levels, that was difficult. Getting the music laid in there. Getting everything meshed together, making the pacing feel right. Cutting out sections that just didn't belong, right? Just didn't fit the overall story. The movie takes place on Thanksgiving, so I knew we were going to wait until the fall to release it. I could have worked faster, I'm sure, but it basically took me up until that deadline to get the film finished, and I was just spending a lot of time finessing fine details. So I was wrapping up editing, and we made plans to rent out a theater for the premiere a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. They would let us sell tickets, and then we could just pay them a fee. And then I learned about a site called Film Hub, where I could upload the movie, and they would basically distribute it out to streaming platforms. So there was a way to put it on Amazon myself, which I did. But with Film Hub, I could upload it and they could send it out to people that I have no access to. It was free to put it up there, and they just got a 50% cut off of whatever AdSense we made on the movie. So there was a list of assets you needed. You needed subtitles, you needed pictures for streaming platforms, you needed posters, a couple of other things like that. But the movie needed to be uploaded to Film Hub by the end of October so it could be up on streamers by Thanksgiving. So the movie was fully done, it was exported, it was ready to go, I finished the subtitles, I got everything done. But there's two different kinds of songs in the movie. So we had a composer who graciously composed incredible work for the film for free. It was so amazing. And then we had songs I had pulled from a service that I paid for. And these are tracks that I've licensed, and I've used these tracks before, primarily for kind of YouTube videos, but there's a wide range of songs that artists upload to that platform, and I'm assuming when I download them, they get some percentage cut. I don't really know how it works on the back end, but they get paid for me then using their songs. So I thought I'd double check about the license agreement on that site. I don't know what it was in my brain, but just something ticked off, and I was like, I need to make sure everything's all good here. When I reread that license agreement in the fine print, it said, can be used online anywhere, except for streaming. My heart sank. The songs that I had in the movie, I felt were perfect. Like, some of them I had placed in when I was doing that first initial edit while we were still shooting the movie. Like, these songs in this movie were so linked in my mind. The entire movie was literally cut to these songs. So I look on the site and I go, what am I gonna do? And they say, well, you're using like our Consumer Plus deal. If you want to use songs in streaming, you can. You just need to apply for our Enterprise deal. Now, the Enterprise deal price is not listed on the website, which is never a good sign. But there's an email you can reach out to. So I send an email, and I really plead my case. And I say, hey, we're these super low-budget filmmakers. We made this movie for just a few $1,000s. Like, we'd love to use these songs in here. Just let me know. How much does it cost? Is there any kind of deal I can make? And about an hour later, I get back a reply. And they say, hey, Mr. Malley, thank you so much for being a customer. We'd be happy to help you with this. For each of these songs, it would only cost you $1,000. So we had like 12 songs in the movie, so that's only going to cost you about $12,000. I had spent like less than $5,000 on this whole movie. $12,000 for these songs? And we're 2 weeks out from the premiere happening. I need to get this thing on streaming as soon as possible so it can be up for Thanksgiving. So I'm just heartbroken. I'm thinking like, can I pay for these songs? Like maybe I just need to raise $12,000 here. Like what am I going to do? So I call my friend who's the producer on the film and he says, look, there are other services that do offer songs that can be licensed and used on streaming. And these services cost only a few $100. It doesn't really make sense to spend $12,000 on these songs, no matter how good you think they are. But I start making a list of all of the songs that I use in the movie, the exact time code that they're used, the energy that's behind them, and we're trying to find other songs to fit those slots. So we had a shared Google Doc, and we just kept adding links from this website to songs that we thought might work. And he was just giving me huge lists of like, for the opening credits, try all of these songs. Which one do you want to use? For this scene in the movie, try all of these songs. I had to go through the whole movie and replace every single song I'd used from that other service. And I couldn't tell when I was replacing them, do I not like this because it's not a good song? Or do I not like this because I've heard the other song so many times when I've watched the scene? There was one, and this was sort of the saving grace. For the closing credits of the film, we found a song that was actually better than the original song. And I remember finding it and laying it in the movie, and I heard it and I was like, this is better than what I had originally. I remember getting up and just kind of jumping around with joy. I was so happy at that point. So it took us about a week to go through the entire movie, and we had to replace every single song. In many ways, I'm very heartbroken that that original film doesn't get shown, but I was so thrilled that it actually did come together, that there was a version that we were able to screen to people, that we were able to put on streaming, that people were able to watch. So I was able to upload the film to Film Hub, and they start sending it out to distributors. They had their own internal process that they had to go through to get approved. We got approved pretty quickly, which was fantastic. And by Thanksgiving, the film was available on streaming services. You can still go in on the back end and get updates in terms of where it is right now. It's been on Tubi for a while. That's where we've gotten most of the views from it. It's also still available on Amazon. We sold tickets for the premiere at a little local theater down the street. Literally, like, within walking distance of the house where we shot the movie, which was so cool. We packed the tiny theater. All of my friends and family and people from the community came to watch the movie, the families of everyone who was in it. It was such a wonderful experience to like sit down with everyone and actually watch this movie that we'd all worked so hard on. It was a little bit overwhelming to kind of see this thing on the big screen. In some ways, it felt very similar to the premiere I had had 10 years before when my first movie was shown in the theater. But this was different because, while it's not perfect, there are many things that I'll do differently when I make my next film. It felt in many ways like a real movie. It felt like we'd been able to create this real thing. And now it's up on streaming and anyone can watch it anywhere in the world. And that just makes me so happy. What I realize is that when you are making something this big or this grand, people want to be a part of it. They want to actually join in on this project. And when I was willing to spearhead this and say, hey, guys, I'm making a movie, people came out of the woodwork to help. Actors, crew members, composers, producers, everyone wanted to work on this movie, even though no money was really associated with it. I put up my own cash to pay for the food on set and buy the equipment that we were shooting the movie with. But besides that, there was basically no money. It was all about the passion and creating this piece of art, and people were thrilled to be a part of it. Now, I'd love to make movies in the future, and I've even had some experiences where I've gotten to pay people, and that's a wonderful feeling. I would love to pay everyone who works on my movies in the future. But simply knowing that it's possible to go out there and make stuff, that you don't need a huge amount of money, you don't need a huge crew, but looking at what's around you and saying, can I write a movie that takes place in this location that I have? Can I find people to play those roles, and can we go out and shoot it? It really showed me what's possible and continues to show me what is possible. So that's how I made a $5,000 movie for Tubi. If you want to add up all the costs from it, it really was the camera, the microphone, the audio recording equipment, the snacks that we used on set, and in the end, I had to buy a laptop to actually edit the movie on. Mine fried pretty quickly as I was trying to edit it. My old one from college just didn't last. And I think even retelling this story, I can feel myself getting energized. Like, this is why I love filmmaking so much. I love the process of bringing people together to tell a story that feels impactful and then sharing that with the world. So I look forward to making my next film, and if you are a filmmaker out there or you work in another discipline, I hope this story can inspire you a little bit, that no matter what we're doing, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be things that get in our way, but just continuing to press through those and figuring out how to get around them, you might find that you're able to create things that you didn't even think were remotely possible. So thank you everyone for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye everybody.